I'm about to go live. That's all. Yeah. Can I help you? Okay, so not right now. You have to come back. How about now you can hear me? What's going on?
What's going on?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Canada Talk with Roz. It's Friday, February, the 18th, I think it is, man.
Yeah, we still in Black History Month.
We're still in Black History Month. We Black History 24/7, 365 days, right? Listen, guys, I'm so happy, man, to be here with you guys. So fortunate to be here. And I want you to stop right now. If you're on Facebook, go share this. Stop. If you're on YouTube, go share the link. Make sure you're subscribed. We got some phenomenal conversation from just a core group of people that I am getting to know, learning and respecting them. They're in Canada, and these are individuals that are making it happen. And they're going to be talking about just, their journey in this cannabis industry from a Black perspective. So I want to welcome everybody to the show. Listen what we got. So we got Heidi talking about happy Friday, happy Black History Month. Hey, Heidi girl, happy Black History Month. So happy to have you. What's up, E? How's your week been going, brother?
And man, it has been a busy week, a beautiful week, of course, man. And I'm tapping in some more people to the room as well as we do this. So make sure y'all hit share, invite your family and friends to join. But it's been an amazing week. It's been fun for me in terms of Black History Month. We're Black History 365, but this month we get to turn it up a notch. You know what I mean? We get to do some intentional programming and conversations. I had a great conversation earlier this week with the daughter of reggae legend Peter Tosh, Naomi McIntosh. So that we as putting out great content. Hemp and Fork, he just put out a blog just the other day doing the history of soul food, like a beginner's guide to the history of soul food, and talking about the origins of that. So again, as our company focuses on food and healthy eating and so on, we took this month as an opportunity to kind of touch on topics that were related to Black history, but also food. And so I think it's just been an awesome week, man. So I'm excited to have this conversation with our guest today, because I think many times, like what we talked about with Naomi earlier this week, like when we think about Black history, for those of us in the U.S., we primarily think about only U.S. Black history, and not remembering that there are folks from African descendants all over the globe, and that is too Black history. That is also human history. So I'm excited to have this conversation today with our neighbors to the north, the Canadian market. They've been ahead of the game in this cannabis space for us. So there's a lot that we can learn from them, I believe.
I want to, before we bring our guests up, let me just set the tone here in making sure you understand. The adult use marijuana market in Canada has generated some $11 billion in retail sales and has led to the creation of 151,000 new jobs, according to economic analysts. The industry has generated $11 billion in sales nationwide and made $29 billion in capital expenditures. Overall, the cannabis industry has contributed $43.5 billion to Canada's GDP and $13.3 billion to Ontario's GDP since legalization. Moreover, the industry has sustained 151,000 jobs, we talked about that, and put $15.1 billion into government coffers. They concluded, from an economic perspective, it seems clear the cannabis industry has been a great success, with more to come as it continues to grow. But we want to know, with people of color, and specifically Black people, what's our role and what's our opportunity? And are we seeing the promise and seeing the dollars and the revenue that's being generated? Are we seeing that in our businesses? So without further ado, I want to start inviting up our guests today. We have our first guest is Miss Keisha Dixon. Hey, Keisha, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here as well. I'm Keisha Dixon, and I'm an attorney in Canada. I do mainly business law and do cannabis as well. I also am the VP of International Business Affairs for Cannabisiac, which is an amazing organization that Roz spoke at our university the other day on Wednesday that is located in Florida, and we're coming to Canada because, as Roz said, we need helpers to get our people in Canada across the line, right?
Yes,
And Cannabisiac educates entrepreneurs as to how to be an active part in the cannabis industry.
absolutely. So welcome, Keisha. Next we have Miss Ika Washington. Hey, Ika, welcome.
Hi everyone, how are you?
And
Um,
yourself.
Good. Yeah. So my name is Ika Washington. I've been working in the cannabis space. Mainly, I started as a patient, and now I've been taking the reins in terms of advocating and doing initiatives that are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism within the space. I also worked in the UK industry in the cannabis space for a couple of years. So my work is both in Canada and the UK, and trying to integrate as much of our community as possible, because I, like you said, Eric, I feel like there's sometimes a disconnect in terms of where we feel like we're in silos, and we have to recognize that it is a global Black community, and that we all need help, and all have to face anti-Black racism in some way and shape and form. So thank you for
Welcome,
having me.
Ika. And I tell Ika all the time I fangirl over her because she's a young, bright, smart, energetic. So, I mean, like she don't take no. I mean, just when she speaks, she knows exactly where she wants to go with her conversation, and we're so happy to have you on today. So, man, thank you so much for being on. Next, we have Miss Antoinette Gomez. Hey, Antoinette, what's going on, sister? How are you? You're on mute.
Hey, love. I'm well, and I'm so happy to be here today with all of you. And I'm so here for the conversation. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm the CEO of Peak Farm Labs. It's a joint venture with Pleasure Peaks and Hybrid Farms. We're a cannabinoid sexual health company, and we bring products to market globally. So we're first to market with our suppositories for endometriosis. And yeah, I'm excited to be here in conversation of what it's like to be an entrepreneur in the Canadian cannabis space.
No, I love it. I think the ingenuity of your product, and also, there's markets are going to open up like sexual health, and what does that mean? Where cannabis can come in and help, and so we definitely want to learn more. But last but not least, excuse me, guys, we have Michael and Anthony and Ashley at Hill. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hi, guys. How are you?
Very good. Thank you.
Good,
Very
good,
good. Thank you for having us today. We are both co-owners, CEO and COO of Harvester Cannabis. We are a micro cultivation and processing facility located in Durham, Ontario. We're the very first federally licensed, fully Black-owned cannabis cultivation and processing facility.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We're so happy to have you guys. I got a chance to meet you
Thanks for having
guys
me.
a couple of weeks ago. And that was the genesis of this conversation because Antoinette serves as our Canada state, well, not state, but for the country is our representative with M for MM. I met Michael and Ashley. I knew Ika, of course, and then I met Keisha this past week, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be good. So let me start off a conversation, and anyone can jump in. But when you hear the numbers, you hear the $43 billion, the $16 billion that went towards a certain province. You hear the number of jobs or what have you. Can you give us kind of like, from your perspective, people of color, I'm not even going to say people of color, Black people, what's our kind of our footprint right now with those dollars? What are we in the market? Are we in the industry? Are we still got our trying to get in the industry? How is some of that money raining down to our Black-owned businesses, and also from a workforce perspective, as well as supplier diversity? And then
Anybody?
anybody can jump in.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump in, but I really would like to hear Michael and Ashley's take on it. Because from my perspective as the attorney, I am like the gatekeeper where people come and try to see, okay, this is what I want to do. Can I do it? And what I'm finding is oftentimes our community, unfortunately, don't have the financial resources to get into the market. They have great ideas, and the other issue they may have in addition to the financial resources is their background, right? So
Yeah.
even though the application says that it's related, like for instance, a retail application, it says that the background is based on if you had an issue against the law itself, meaning the cannabis law, right? And not the being pulled over on the side. So at least it's not a matter of whether or not in their past they have been pulled over, but is a matter of whether or not they've violated the cannabis law that is in effect. Unfortunately, some people may have had stores that weren't legal, right? And because the municipality goes around and shuts them down, right,
Yeah.
they may have come in violation of that part of it and are not able to register, right? So that's where I see where people can't get in, but I would love to hear their opinion as to how many people they see when they go to different events that may be in the industry.
Right.
I was just well, I think the first person that can speak to that, and Ashley asked me to start off, but I'm just gonna say when you went to all of your events when you first started out in the industry, because Ashley's a legacy grower. Maybe speak to that a little bit, and that kind of set the foundation for what we're about to say.
So, hi everybody, and my name is Ashley Athill again. I started off as a legacy grower. Our family has very deep roots in agriculture in Jamaica. And so when I started off, what I was doing was not correct, but I was so fortunate to actually not have any charges put against me. That being said, in Canada, I actually started off my cannabis journey working at an accessory store. So it wasn't a dispensary, it was an accessory store called Hotbox. And there we had the ability to, and this is pre-legalization, teach individuals how to grow their own medical cannabis right when legalization was happening, because we knew that there was going to be 4 plants per household. The police at the time knew what we were doing. We were even featured on our news network, CBC. So during that time, that period of pre-legalization, there was a somewhat of an allowance. And I want to acknowledge the fact that I was quite lucky in that space. I was not, I did not have the same fate as many individuals, especially in America, but absolutely, especially in Canada when it comes to utilizing this plant in the illegal space. But just to answer your question, there are more and more people of color coming into this space.
Yes.
We're seeing a lot more people in the larger manufacturers and even in the larger companies really holding great positions. But there's absolutely more work that needs to be done. When we were first licensed, there was a report that came out from University of Toronto that mentioned that the ownership in the cannabis industry in Canada with regards to Black ownership specifically was less than 1%. We at that time was the less than 1%. So if that gives you a scope of what is happening in Canada, I'm hoping that those numbers can reflect that. But because we're speaking to Americans, I also want you to take into consideration in Canada, there's only about 36 million people. In Canada, the Black representation is only about 3.5% or 3% in between those numbers. So if you're putting that together, then you can have a full landscape of what we're working with. And I want to, Michael and Antoinette and Ika, if you have anything to add to that, like I would love to hear.
Absolutely. Just to chime in for real quick, I think the bottom line is the answer is no. Like we need to have more representation in this industry. And I know that there's a lot of people who are trying to find solutions to that. Right. And including ourselves. Right. So we'll get into all that a little bit later, I'm sure. But the bottom line is no, we need solutions to get to where we need to go.
So let me break some numbers down, and then Antoinette, I want to hear from you. So population of Canada, 36 million people. 3% of that is only a million 80,000 people. So Black people, right? So and so if you do in reverse, this the U.S. has a population of 300 million people, with about a 12% of the population being African Americans, right? So those are the numbers that we got to think about. Where we think, I guess my point is that we think we have it bad over here in the U.S., but in regards to number wise, it's really difficult in Canada. It seems that way. And so, Antoinette, if you want to chime in, then Ika would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I would love to chime in. I've been in this space for a very long time and have got to work with, Ika and Ashley and Athill over the years. And it's been an incredible experience. I think for us, it's been really unique. It's been the anomaly. It's been a unique space that we've been able to really get forward and ahead in terms of the industry, but it's not usually the case for most. I think the statistic that really is the most sobering for me is that there's only 1% of the industry that is Black currently. And I think we did a really recent study, and that number hasn't moved. Correct me if I'm wrong. I still think it's 1%. Other spaces like Hispanic and Indigenous has grown, but Black, there still seems to be a glass ceiling. And I think it's really a topic that needs to be discussed more. And this is something that I've thought about for so many years, and I've worked with Ashley and Ika on the ways that we can get around it. And I think it comes down to 4 pillars that I always discuss, which is education, understanding the legal framework. If you don't understand or learn how to get involved, how can you do so compliantly? Obviously, having the funds to do so. It's really important that we can go and compete with big pharma, big alcohol, big politics that are already involved in these industries.
Yeah.
And what I think is, a message I would love to share with you guys is to really talk to your banks, really, really discuss with your banks the lack of diversity and equity within our industry, wherever you are, because these times are changing. So actually last week, there was $100 million that was injected by BMO Bank, and they want to put it into Black female entrepreneurship. I think that is wonderful. This is a great starting conversation on Black History Month, but let's take it another step further and let's put this a part of our diversity, equity, inclusion with Health Canada, right? We're already seeing other banks do initiatives like Alterna. Let's bring BMO a part of the conversation. So I think it's about collectively just pushing forward the needle. But those are 2 areas. I think that the third area is networking and support and mentorship. This is incredibly crucial for entrepreneurs to have that support. If you're a small entrepreneur or a solo entrepreneur, it could be very discouraging to get a business of this magnitude off the ground. It's so heavily regulated that it's bringing a rocket ship to life, which is what it feels like sometimes in the cannabis industry. And the fourth is resources. I think that there's a lack of opportunity when it comes to business knowledge and entrepreneurship, specifically when it comes to the Black community. And I think this is because of the war on drugs. I see this from my own family, as my grandfather was a Rastafarian, who was deported, and I had my family broken. But I find that these are so common stories within our specific community. And since we have been targeted way more than any other community, it's important that we further these conversations because there is still a glass ceiling. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation today because Ika, myself, and Ashley and Michael have been really here helping entrepreneurs at the forefront. If you ever have questions, always wanting to support the other entrepreneurs. Another thing I would like to say is that I think it's just so unfortunate that this work ends up on the backbones of minorities, and it should be at the top level. But that's another conversation, and we'll get there collectively. And I think this is a great start.
No, that's awesome.
Well said.
You guys all, you touched on something in terms of the regulatory framework, right? One thing I always talk to people who ask me about how to get into the industry, I always, one, tell them they need to make sure that they do what they need to do from a mental standpoint to make that mental shift, but then to go and understand the regulatory framework, because that will show you what you can do and can't do in terms of opportunities, but then also help to keep you, out of trouble. We know capitalization is a tough thing for not just minorities, because let's be honest, there are white folks in this space that are having a difficult time getting capitalized as well. But talk to us, if you guys can give us kind of like a short synopsis of what is the legal framework. Ashley, I'm sorry.
Ashley,
you mentioned earlier.
And then let Ika, she have a comment in regards to our first breaking out, and then we'll go into compliance regulatory, if you don't mind, E.
Go ahead.
I want Ika to weigh in, and then, because I think even from a compliance and regulatory, the U.S. doesn't understand. Like, I was tripping when I figured out that when you create product, you sell it to the government sells it back to, like, so let's talk about that, right? So hold on one second. I want Ika to weigh in on that last conversation point, and then we're going to talk about that, because that's kind of, it sets me off when I think about it. But go ahead, Ika.
Yeah, I'll keep it short because I think everyone kind of touched on the points that I would have already elucidated to. So in short, no to that initial question. And I think that coming from an employment, I was actually kind of shocked at that number, because I was like, I've been in the space working for an LP in the beginning, and I can guarantee you I was the only Black person.
Yeah.
And then I saw another Black person, which was Derek Dudley, who Roz is very familiar with. And I was like, oh my God, that's
Derek is a connector. If Derek connects all of us together, right?
I was super excited. And then after I saw another Black person, I was like, okay, so it's 3 of us, but I'm the only Black woman in the space. So when we had this brand that was like fully Caribbean, like it was the Marley brand, and they're like, oh yeah, we're bringing it to Carabana because that's where all the Jamaicans are. And if you know anything about the Toronto Carnival, it's not Jamaican. It's very much the other island. So I was sitting there, I said, oh, good job. I was like, I'm not going to speak on top of that. Like, you guys do your research, right? So you end up becoming a token. Like, there's a lot of tokenism within the industry, especially because I'm still mind blown by that big number, because I'm saying, like, even now working in a regulatory space, and I don't want to mention them right now, but I'm, again, the only Black girl, and they're like, oh yeah, well, we're doing a report on DEI, and I'm like, oh, that's good for you guys. I'll contribute what I have to, but I'm not going to be speaking on it, because, again, I don't want to be the one that it falls on my shoulders, because having to have those conversations in the space is like, it's vulnerable. You put yourself in a very vulnerable space. You have to talk about your experiences, and they're like, oh, that's so sad. Oh my God. So it's just kind of like, do I really want fellow Black people to be in this space that it's not that diverse? But at the same time, I need you guys to be in this space because I need it to be more diverse. So it's kind of like Antoinette kind of going on that point of education. It goes beyond just like, it's stigma. It's talking about history. It's talking about prohibition in Canada, UK, Canada, all these different places, as to why it's fundamental that we need to push forward, because people are still in the space saying, oh, it's legal in Canada, there's no stigma. And I'm sitting there like, okay. I
just had a conversation with someone yesterday who was in a major, one of the major companies or whatever, and we're talking, and long story short, it's like when you're in a position and it's at a senior level, but you're the only one there, as a Black person, it feels so uncomfortable, because you want to bring more people, but you're like, also, I don't want to be just a token Black person that you come to me for every, like, okay, so what should we be doing? And especially because of Black History Month, you know how it goes. Like, hey, can you come talk to us because you're the Black person? So anyways, but let me go back to E, because E, you had a great point. So E, reframe that question up and shoot it back out.
Yeah, in regards to, like, here in the US, we have a lot going on in terms of, we have like a progression through the regulatory cycle, if you will, medical, then adult use, and hemp kind of came in there in this time, whereas you guys are already legal at the federal level, right? And so it creates different opportunities for folks, but it may also create barriers, because I know we're having conversations about, if it goes legal at the federal level for recreational, right now in the U.S., that's going to leave a lot of Black and brown folks out because of how it's going to be done. And so I wanted you all to speak to the regulatory structure that's there in place, because, again, if you are somebody who wants to get into the industry, you need to understand that, because they show you where the opportunities are, and also where the barriers are. exist as well. So can you guys kind of give us that synopsis of what it looks like? Because Ashley, you did mention that you guys are licensed federally, correct? And I am assuming that's different than something than a different class of licensing. So can you break that down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are federally licensed, and as a federally licensed entity, we have 2 licenses. That is the license to cultivate, so you're cultivating, growing the plant, and we also have a license to actually process the plant. So that means taking the harvested flower and then turning it into a product. We're right now in the middle of obtaining our sales license, which actually allows us to distribute direct to the federal distributor. Provincial distributor. We have provinces, not states. So essentially you have this level where we didn't even have to be thoroughly checked out. We had to have RCMP or police clearances to get to that point. And we also had to have a fully built out facility, hold that facility for more than a year to actually fully get licensed. So can you actually see all of the obstacles that we would have to go through?
Wait a minute. Did you say y'all had to build out the facility first?
Before we even press send on the application.
Exactly.
So we could not. And think about this, a barrier for people from systemically racialized areas or backgrounds, or communities. How can you build a facility even before you press send on an application? It has to be completely finished.
GMP, GPP certified,
everything to the T before you even press send on the application, and then you go through the process of the application. It is a barrier that is extremely difficult to overcome.
Sorry, what was that, Eric?
What happens if you don't get the license?
You don't get the license.
That's
it. You don't get the license.
You're gonna just go make brownies in your facility.
Better know what you're doing.
I also want to add the fact that we have to add attestations to that. So when we actually are going through the process of getting our license, we have to let Health Canada know that we've spoken to fire, ambulance, and police. Michael and I, we actually had to physically go to the police station to actually get this attestation signed. Now, Michael and I are from, I guess you could say, a low-income community. And, you know, we've been in situations where, you know, police officers haven't been that kind to our community members. So having that past history, that memory, and literally going to the police station and saying, hey, guess what? We have a facility. We're going to be growing weed in your backyard, and I need you to sign this paper to tell Health Canada that we're okay with that. You're okay with it.
Okay with it.
You can't do anything about it, by the way. Right? So it was a traumatic. It was a traumatic experience, but thankfully it all turned out in the end as a positive. But you know,
that'll make you go smoke some cannabis for sure.
Yeah, it was an ordeal.
So
Exactly.
Keisha, what are the different licensing opportunities in Canada? You know, at the federal level, at the provincial level, what are the different opportunities?
Okay, so as I said, you have the grower/cultivator license, right? And you also have the license to sell. And as they said, it's not to sell to people, right? It's to sell to the government, right? And then you have the license for packaging. You have license for retail, right? Which in my opinion, for people who the quickest way would be to try and get the retail license if you weren't like gung-ho about getting a medical license or a cultivation license. I see Antoinette might disagree with me a bit.
Get one of these, like right here.
Yeah. Right. But I say that because I think financially it's less intensive than the other routes, right? Because they just have to get a lease from a landlord for the space, so they don't have to own that space themselves. For retail, it's not like they have to retrofit it as much as the cultivator, who has to think about lighting, who has to think about security. Yes, different security because it's a bigger space, right? So there are different cost analysis that make me believe that the retail space might be a quicker entry point for those who are looking to touch the plant and not be ancillary like myself.
Okay, pause for a second here. So, because you said a couple of things there. One, the retail, maybe a lower entry barrier for some people, but you said that you don't sell directly to people; you sell to the government. So let me make sure I'm
Okay. All
understanding
right.
this correct.
Okay.
Break
So
that down for us.
thank you for bringing that up. So when I say retail, so that is in terms of selling to the consumer, right? The actual end product that's packaged. That's what I mean by retail, right? Which is separate from the cultivator who sells the raw plant to the cannabis store, which is the government.
So Antoinette, you had a comment, and then Ashley, let me flip back to you. Antoinette, you were saying kind of from an
Yeah, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about
Yeah.
retail. I think that there's so many opportunities in terms of entrepreneurship in cannabis, and I love it because this means that, there's a space for everyone in cannabis. Maybe you do love growing and being a part of cultivation, and there's a space for you. Maybe you do love being in the science and research space, and there's a license for that, research license, sales license, processing license, and there's so many. It's just crazy how many licenses we have. But I wanted to talk about retail specifically because I was interested in getting involved in the retail space. I think it's been cheaper than ever to get into retail right now because of how competitive the market is in Canada. And I think that is very telling on how quickly we were to give out those licenses. I think, to buy a dispensary as a franchise, it's usually around $500,000, $500,000. And now you're finding so many dispensaries are closing up shop and just willing to part with anything for just $50,000. So those are like very shocking numbers, and it's really competitive. But I still think that there's opportunity. If you love working with customers and being at the forefront and doing retail, there's still space for you. I think it's just knowing your research and being in like not as a competitive market as a downtown city core, but I still think that there's opportunity. And another thing I would love to add is we don't talk about the pharmacy license. There's another sales license that we can use, which isn't being as utilized as much as I would like to see in Canada. And I think that there's so much potential there. I think that there's so much potential for helping existing physicians and pharmacists grow their patients with different types of alternative products, including cannabis. And with those licenses, I'm excited to see how that will grow into other alternative drugs as well.
Let me ask you a question. Is your product would be under a pharmacy license? Is that kind of your place?
It will be. And I think that I did that strategically because my specific product is always about medical cannabis and for patients. It's not a very recreational product. So that's why we wanted to roll it out that way. So for me, if you want to think about it, me as a Black woman who comes again from a low income neighborhood, for me to get a business started here in Canada, being an LP, like self-funded, like Ashley and Michael, was just out of my realms, raising that type of capital. But what I knew I could do is I could partner with someone and sell my brand and create my own brand and grow my own following and do the due diligence on what's actually effective and sustainable in cannabis. So with that being said, I've been lucky enough to partner with a processing license and grow those partnerships with other LP licenses as well. So now I can have a product in Canada, but also use other partners to export my product globally as well without having to do the whole thing of being a public or private LP.
Sure.
So I think that there's different ways of entrepreneurship and there's something here for everyone, which is so exciting. But yeah, retail is definitely a lot more affordable these days, but it's so scary. And I'm just saying that people will take your money at the end of the day and it's very competitive, but it's still possible.
Is it competition that is kind of putting a damper on the retail, or is it regulatory, influences that are making people go out of business?
It's the fact that the government is being very slow in its support to help these businesses. When you want to open up a dispensary, you can't even see the dispensaries that are popping up to you because they're popping up so quickly. So you think that there's only one competitor in the market, but you're 6 months in, finally getting your store off the ground, and now there's six in your neighborhood. So I think
Yeah.
it's just a little bit, it's growing way too quickly in these oversaturated markets. And it's just hard because there's not much support from the government on that end. Plus, when we're thinking about the price points, the margins that these retailers are making, the government is making insane amounts of profit off of our business. It's insane. To put this into perspective, you were saying, Eric, how you went from medical to rec to hemp. I started a hemp business in Atlanta, Georgia for $40,000, $50,000 really. But to start a business in Canada, a product line is easily $180,000. So it's very difficult and the difference of starting a product line here in terms of affordability. But I think it's worth it in different ways. And I think Canada's worth it when we're talking about medical cannabis products. It's a whole other thing if you want to talk about the flower game right now. There's like 500 brands.
I like that. I like specialization. Ashley, did you have a comment that you want to share?
Yeah, just on your point of the pharmacy licenses, other licenses that we don't really talk about, which is also behind the veil near cultivation, is a nursery license and as well laboratory licenses. Let's not push out people who are focused on tech and sciences out of this because there are opportunities within that space. There is a large startup when it comes to those spaces because they are highly regulated, but it allows the audience to actually see that there is a holistic industry that is here. So when it comes to our laboratories, we know that they are licensed and they are held to a certain standard to ensure that all of our testing is up to par. And I would assume globally recognized. So just a couple of other options within the space, but even if those are not viable options for individuals, there are many auxiliary businesses that one can actually create within the industry that you can take hold of, especially if you have pre-existing skill sets.
Exactly.
So, Michael, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, I mean, we always speak to utilizing what you have already to make it work within this industry. Like, for example, when we were building our facility, we looked at our own community to help us with master electricians, HVAC engineers, security specialists, irrigation specialists, so on and so forth, so that they can then take their skill sets, use it within our facility, and then go to another facility, be like, yeah, I've worked in a cannabis facility already. I know exactly what I'm doing. Building infrastructure within our community that way. That's how we're going to build this community, this Black community of and infrastructure, building it to the point where we are now reciprocating that dollar back within our community. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most important things that we're not really talking about is how do we get this Black dollar to fall back in our community multiple times? It's building within and keeping it within, right?
Yeah.
So doing that is so integral to everything that we're doing. And like I said, we can talk about the initiative that we're building later down the line, but having that across the board is everything what we're trying to do here outside of licensing.
I want to segue over to ICO because they're talking about medical and they're talking about the pharmacy license, but you did something, and I think Antoinette, you were involved in it as well with Health Canada, where you guys started having this really very direct conversation. It seems like the government knows in Canada that they have a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue, right? And so for some reason, but can you talk about Health Canada and the work that you guys just did recently and how that plays to what this conversation is about today?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I work with Health Canada. So working internally and having that conversation has been something that I know Michael and Ashley were the actual catalysts for in terms of having that conversation with the directors and the managers and etc. I'm just part of the journey in terms of making sure that that work is being done. But on January the 26th and 27th, Health Canada had their first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Forum. It was a 2-day session. The first day focused on the licensing process and breaking down that information and having representatives like managers and decision makers that are the ones that are going through the application, etc., talk about the application process and kind of demything in terms of the certain and debunking rather certain things that are people have been talking about within the industry, like security, which Ashley and Michael were the ones that told me that even if you have certain type of convictions, that you still are able to pass security clearance. And it was, and that was information that they kind of relayed as best as they could within reason. And then the second day was focusing more on shared lived experiences, which I had conversation with the Indigenous Service Manager Director about what is it like to be a person of color, an Indigenous person or a Black person within the space. What are the barriers that we've heard within our community? And I think between that conversation, there was a lot of things that we've already discussed that are really stemmed in terms of anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Black racism, and looking at like anti-Asian racism and having those conversations that they're very much based on colonialism. And we cannot stray away from the fact that Canada is a colonial state in terms of being connected to the UK and our history, etc. Right? So that was one conversation. And then the other conversation was success stories. So talking about like Michael and Ashley and how they ended up with becoming one of a license holder. Looking at other Indigenous stories as well.
So proud. I mean, now that we know you had to build out a whole facility before you could even apply for the license, it makes my heart like, you think I was proud before to get connected with you guys.
I still have the scars.
Listen. So all y'all U.S. people that are out here, we're out here like we do have it tough. Don't get me wrong. So shout out. I see you, Gerald Moore in Ohio, but just know that, man, that is some serious business to have all of that infrastructure in there and not even know if you're going to get the license yet. And it could be a roll of the dice. And I'm so just grateful that it worked in your favor. So, I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just, man.
It's okay. No. Honestly, I felt the same way when I heard as well. Like when I was going through and learning about licensing and having to actually look at applications myself, I'm sitting here and I'm like, wait, what? Like they're teaching me all this stuff. And I said, so wait, they have to get lights, they have to get water, they have to get security. Like it's a lot. And I was sitting there and I'm like sitting there and I'm like, no wonder not seeing a lot of Black applications. Like, how could they? Like, are they aware of the issues that we face and the barriers that they face? How could they? Like, it was just mind blowing. But that conversation and having that started within our teams. And being a part of that was such a rewarding part. But even learning about Indigenous communities and how they can get licenses on reserves was just mind-blowing in terms of like the government not understanding how reserves work and the politics and the different tribal councils and etc. So as we look and we open this book in terms of like looking at barriers that are faced and diversity issues, it's like all different communities in Canada are facing a lot of issues, but even particularly Black communities, because we have such small population, sometimes we struggle to have that advocacy because it's not enough of us sometimes. But looking at these beautiful people on the screen right now, I'm like, that's when I started really finding my voice and having that support, because I'm like, they got my back. Like I could go out there and say something. But that's where we are right now in terms of Health Canada really switching the lens and saying like, okay, we can't ignore this anymore. Like it's everywhere, and we can't, change policy without that community engagement and consultation as we review the Cannabis Act moving forward. Because one point I did want to make is that one of the main differences between the Canadian population and American population is that we're heavily based on immigrants. So a lot of our Black communities are based on people from back home. So like, for example, I'm from a Jamaican background. I can't forget that Jamaica has a cannabis industry and they want to integrate and work with Jamaican Canadians here. So exportation is a big part of the Cannabis Act that we're looking at changing or trying to influence, because we want Jamaican ganja here too. Like, and we want our Jamaicans here.
I thought you guys had exporting opportunities of being able to export. Is that not?
It's limited,
right?
It's very limited. And Keisha, you can speak on that.
Well, most of the export that I've seen happening is based on research. So it's not that it's for sale purposes. It's literally based on sending it to Canada for them to do research here, or vice versa, to research the plant and the benefits. But it's not for consumer
Commerce.
sale.
Well, it's no
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Jamaica's always doing research, I find, but
Yeah.
always do.
Yeah.
You guys are so ahead of it. But I think that when it also comes to import export, majority of it has been medicinal, and mostly
yes.
to like Israel and Germany, Australia specifically as well.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
But
You
Wow.
know,
Wow.
just
Wow.
because, sorry, Egg, because Aiko brought up the Cannabis Act, I just wanted to put another point in there that I don't think we have mentioned yet, or I don't want us to forget about the Rastafarians and the indigenous people, that there's no exemption there for them,
No.
right? And this is their sacrament, this is part of their culture, yet still, if they are in a space and sharing that in a particular way, the local authorities will come and shut them down, right? Because they don't have a license.
Right.
They're required to get a license instead of actually getting an exemption within the act.
Wow. 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 E, you had a comment or you had a question, E?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's such a great point. I think from a legislative standpoint, it shows that Canada still has a lot of work to do, just like we have here in the U.S. But I wanted to stay with the theme of diversity, equity, and inclusion in particular. We talked about trying to create a more diverse industry through licensing, but I'm curious because we're having this conversation here in the U.S. about those companies that are white run, white owned, and well capitalized. What are we doing? What is the conversation with those organizations about them being more diverse, about their obligation to reaching back to these communities that bore the brunt of the prohibition and so on? So, can you guys talk to us about what is that conversation like in Canada?
Or let me just put something else on top of that. Is anybody funding Black-owned businesses? Are they looking?
That's what we're really getting at, Ross.
Then we'll put that out. I guess it's more importantly the role of those large Canadian companies that we know are very well high capitalized. What is their position about DEI as well?
I think, Aika, you'd probably be the best person to speak to it, and Antoinette, simply because you guys have worked with other LPs. I worked with Med Relief a very long time ago, and that conversation wasn't there. So I would love to see your perspective on things.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. They're not having conversations. Yeah, that's where I'm at with them. Like, I'm fully frustrated. I've been like, my entire brand was based on the fact that I had a horrible experience working with an LP and having to have those conversations, like I said about the Marley brand, like I said about talking about expunging and amnesty. Like, and it hasn't changed. Like, it's more buzzwords for them now. Like, it's like, yeah, like, we're behind community, we want to do community engagement, but hey, you're Black, your community, here you go, but no funding.
Yeah.
Or it's like, we can't help you monetarily, but we can be there behind you. Here's our logo. Like, what am I supposed to do with a logo? Like, okay, great.
Promote their brand
with them. Like,
because I'm making connections in my head. You mentioned Marley Brand and so on, and the LP that is working with them. These companies got money. Like, they have raised so much damn money. And I know this because I'm in Florida. Many of the Florida companies went to damn Canada to go get publicly traded to raise hundreds of millions of dollars. What are you saying that there's no funding going into even community? Like, where the hell are they spending the money?
In their jets that they're going to get more portfolio manager and more money to waste. That's where it is. I've worked there. I've worked in very high levels with the board directors, with the VPs, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh wow, so this is where this money is going, when you could have used a fraction of it and put it into teaching, for example, Black doctors about medicinal cannabis and how to treat their patients, which a lot of Black patients experience pain like myself. I have fibromyalgia, and there's limited research on Black patients with fibromyalgia and how we benefit from medicinal cannabis. Why can't you put money into doing stuff like that? Like, it's them relying, it's like they're sitting down and they're like, okay, maybe we should get a diversity consultancy company, but let's get one that does not know anything about cannabis, that can just give us the generalization of what DEI is. And we just gonna slap that onto our company and be like, yeah, we did training.
We're gonna put it in our ESG report, and yeah.
No. Even
think-
we're gonna put it in
I think
our we're gonna do it, and then we're gonna forget about it once we get the license.
I think ultimately they're not at all concerned. And I think that's a signal to each and every one of us, all of the entrepreneurs, all of the employees as well, that you do have an opportunity to build it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no like, as hard as it may be, that personally put a fire underneath me to actually make it happen.
Yeah.
Because I have been in environments, I've actually worked in a corporate environment where they focus on corporate mental health, and they had a toxic environment. So what does that tell you?
Yeah.
That tells you that if you put yourself in a position of leadership, if you put yourself in a position where you have the ability to make the decisions or collaborate on decisions, that you can make the change that you want. I understand it's not that easy. I do.
Yeah.
But you have to be very selective, especially as an employee. You have to be very selective. You have to know exactly the values and the history of the organization that you're applying to, so that you know exactly where you're spending the majority of your time and your life. And it's really as simple as that. It has to go beyond your salary. It has to go beyond, oh, your friend is getting you in. You have to really know who you're working for, or we're just going to end up in the same position like we always are.
And just to add on to that as well, it's the flip side. As an employer, how do you treat your employees? How do you make sure that you are generating a sustainable environment that you would want to work in if you were an employee there? That's the way that we look at our own business, Harvester, right? We look at it from both sides of the fence. Like, how would I act in this situation? Or is it sustainable for me to be here? Or is that person happy here right now? Having all these conversations internally, we don't have a diversity problem, obviously, right? But just understanding that, there could be people that do have that image or have that issue is so important, right? From both sides of the fence.
Real quick, yes or no from you guys. In the U.S., there's a general consensus that if you're in the cannabis industry, you have some obligation to repair the harm from prohibition and the war on drugs. Does that resonate in Canada as well?
No.
Okay, go ahead, Ross. I mean, I know there's histories, but I just wanted to confirm that.
I just wanted to add to that before we go a little bit further, is that because just something that Eric mentions, where's the money going? Where is the money going? These are billion-dollar businesses that have literally bled millions of dollars on nothing over and over again. And I think that there's so many shareholders that are really pissed off in the Canadian market right now, and they're seeing how horrible ex politicians, ex pharma, ex police chiefs could really be at growing pot. How some people could be at growing pot and selling pot are just not. They don't have that expertise. So we're lacking the diversity in this industry, and this is what we're finding. I think it's really interesting how some companies that have so much money can't even keep a master grower, can't even keep a plant healthy. And they are huge. They are huge brands, but that's what happens when you have a monopoly here in Canada. And that's when we have a federal market. It's a very, very small bunch of players at hand here. And there's just so much money being dumped. But what I will say is that this is an amazing opportunity for diversity. And this is an amazing win for the underdogs, since we're learning that just throwing money at a plant is not what's going to sell weed. What we're learning is that we need to go back to the legacy market. We need to find those master growers, their aquaponics, their all of their crazy growing opportunities, their expertise in medical applications, what has worked for patients. Because we did have a medical patients a database before we went recreational. So it's important that we go back to those things. And I think that's what we're learning. Now we're seeing all of these big LPs are transferring back to medical, reevaluating their medical products, really specializing into research finally. So that's where the money is kind of gone. And I think that's what happens when, there's a new drug. It's just what happens with drug policy changing, especially when people are really excited. But it's unfortunate that we've lost a lot of money because of the lack of diversity. And that's how much harm, racism can really do to an industry.
I think that's really well said. And this is a
Mhm.
thing that Ashley and I always use internally, which is you can't buy your way in, you have to earn your way in.
Yes.
And I think what they've tried to do was literally buy their way in and forget about the people who really pushed the industry before legalization, which was the master growers like Ashley. Like there's a lot of different aspects to that people just they forgot about and thought they could just money all the way and it'll get them to that point. The second point being how in fact, I'm going to save that point until later on because I think that it will come up afterwards and I don't want to jump the gun out.
Hey, but I would tell you this, Michael. How about I just love the fact you was like, and the master grower Ashley, because I was like, I didn't know who was the master grower, and he was like Ashley. So hey, shout out to Ashley listen. So listen, we got about 5 to 10 more minutes, and I want to make sure that we touch on like what you guys are specifically doing now within your respective places in the industry. I think there's something to be said about the power of partnerships. And I think, Antoinette, you've been able to have your brand. Michael and Ashley, I got a chance to look a little bit about Harvester and about your white labeling program. So I want to give everybody a chance to talk about we talked about what the challenges are, but I think where we really get excited is about the promise of where we're going and how we're trying to get there. Also with Keisha, with Cannabisiac, where do you see that coming into play in Canada? And of course, Ika, talking about diversity talk, which I think is so dope. And I would love to do a diversity talk, kind of live diversity talk not roundtables, but sessions where we go into different cities and provinces and come into the US and we just bring people together and we just talk about it. So, Antoinette, go first. Talk about where you are right now and the promise. What's on the horizon for yourself?
Thank you. What's on the horizon for myself? So now with the new joint venture, Canada has taken on everything of my plate. So I'm really focused on growing the sexual health brand, funding the medical research at hand, and bringing quality products to patients globally. That's my job now. So just looking for global partnerships in terms of research and distribution. And I'm still the director of Canada at 4MMM, and I'm always here to help support anybody who's an entrepreneur who's interested. I'm obviously spread really thin right now, but I have access to the industry as I've been here for almost 9 years now, which is kind of incredible. So yeah. I still work with all of the big players. And that's what I was trying to talk about earlier as well, is I don't like to think that there's not a lot of money in this industry. Like you said, there's tons of money in this industry. It's just that you're not going to do it doing basic things. It's just that ship has sailed. That ship has sailed, right? We're not going to throw money at another pre-roll anymore, right? It's not working, guys. But we can into other advancements. So I'm always here to...
How about a pre-packed? Hey, we'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that. But I'm always excited to hear other ideas because I think cannabis, and I'll say it again, I'm saying it a million times, I think cannabis has the opportunity to change healthcare as a whole and the world as a whole as well in so many areas. So I'm happy to be a part of the progress.
Are you building a business to sell a business? Or are you building it to keep it for a long time?
Oh, my business is going to way outlive me for sure. I'm going to have to sell it because I'm going to, be gone for sure. But I'll probably sell within 5 to 10 years to a bigger company that can take it to the next level. I need to bring it to at least 12 countries before I do that. That's my plan. And we're really looking to go. As long as it's in alignment, that's what matters. What I'm happy about is that pharma is having conversations with us. So we're already having these big conversations with these companies that are very normal. And I'm really excited to see that in the future.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Ashley and Michael, the power of partnership. You got this white label brand. You could talk about ways that you're being able to bring your vision for your business to fruition through partnerships, and what's out there that you can offer to other Blacks in Canada and also in the US that want to work in the region.
Absolutely. So having our license, we actually, as we've discussed earlier, have the ability to bring product to market and soon direct to across Canada. So our white labeling offering definitely allows a variety of products to be produced as of right now. And it's not that bad to have pre-rolls because pre-rolls is one of the highest categories in Ontario. I'm just putting it out there.
Hey, Black Buddha pre-packs, guys.
Listen, ain't nothing wrong with a pre-roll. Yeah, so we are actually partnering with a lot of actually retail stores right now to help them bring their house products to market, and as well other individuals from different parts of Canada who are interested in bringing their own brand to the forefront. So if we can provide any type of service for those individuals, we're here to support. We're also working on a non-for-profit that will actually help individuals understand a little bit more of the cannabis industry, provide them access to resources and as well funding. And I just want to say here, thank you, Antoinette, because you know what, guys, let's make this full circle. Aika, we might have been in the position to talk to Health Canada about this DEI forum, but it was truly Antoinette that actually brought it to me for it to actually come to fruition. So we give her flowers whenever they are, needed.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah, and I mean, just about our initiative as well. We've identified these pillars, and we feel that there's education, employment, and entrepreneurship. Where do we do with those? How do we find solutions surrounding those? If anybody's interested, seedinitiative.ca. Our website is harvester.ca. First and foremost, that's our baby. Let's make things happen together, honestly, because I think with these partnerships that we're talking about,
we welcome them.
We welcome them, honestly. So just reach out to us and hit us up. We're here.
I love it.
We're your friendly neighborhood up north.
Well, but because you know what, there was some talk that it was, initially that if there were brands that were Black brands that were trying to come into Canada from the U.S., that there was kind of like a bumping of heads, and it's just refreshing to know that negative stigma or whatever that was out there in the universe is not true, and that not only are you guys looking to support other Black owned businesses and brands in Canada, but there's an opportunity for U.S. businesses. And how awesome would that be is if we can't get it popping down here in the U.S., we come to Canada and get it popping and create our money and then come back to the U.S. So I don't know. I just think it's really awesome. I know I'm plugged in.
That's the play.
Yes. And we're looking forward to your brand, Roz. We're really looking forward to it.
It's an ecosystem. We got to keep this energy flowing. Hey, Keisha, we would love Keisha. Tell us about Cannabisiac and where you see for yourself and this great brand and business that you're in.
Right. So it's good to hear what Michael and no, your screen is blocking. I can't see her name. Ashley. Right. What Michael and Ashley are talking about education, because most of my time for the last year and a half has been about education, educating people from all over the world through Cannabisiac about cannabis, the history of cannabis. So the last 6 months, in addition to practicing law, every Thursday night, I'm teaching a cohort of individuals about the history of cannabis, the plant, different countries, what they have been through, how to know that when you go into the cannabis business, it's not just about making money. You have to do some advocacy as well, because we still need a lot of people to be advocates out there, because it's not over yet. We still, it may seem like in Canada we're further along, but there's still so much work to be done. So for Cannabisiac, our goal, we chose to start off in Florida first because the main principal CEO is in Florida, and I'm in charge of bringing the business to other jurisdictions. So the next opening is in Canada. So I'm so happy to be here amongst you, because I'll be hitting every one of you up to help with this growth on the Canadian side. And then after we have established Canada, we'll go to Jamaica and then some other selected countries where we think that this model will really work, where we stand alongside entrepreneurs to help them grow their business.
Yeah, it's like a university. I spoke yesterday, and the cool thing about it was about a hands-on university. So sometimes university, you go, you get the information, they go, good job, out the door. And I could just tell with Keisha And with Anne Marie, it's very hands-on. It's very, very specific and tangible and measurable. And how do we get you from ground zero and get you up the ladder to be able to be successful? And then also reminding people that you got to pay it back, because when you pay it back, it really does work in such harmony together. So kudos to you, Keisha. I will make sure that you get Antoinette's information, Michael, because there is such connection, as well as Ika. If you guys didn't know Keisha, now you have another new friend in Canada. So I'm so happy. I feel like my job is done, honey. I done got people connected. So, but last but not least, Ika, tell us a little bit about like, I know you work for corporations, but I just had someone ping me on my cell phone, and they were like, Ika is awesome. Like, we need to get her on our team. And so I'm telling you, Ika, you again, it's just a breath of fresh air, because you're young and energetic, and all of you guys are young, especially in comparison to myself, but just in all of what you're doing. So tell us about Diversity Talk and where you see that going, and what's important, and the partnerships you're looking for when it comes to that entity.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are reframing ourselves to focus primarily on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-racism, specifically in the cannabis space, and tailoring our language and education towards that. Mostly is going to be targeted towards big corporations, but also working with community engagement. So again, I've been working, or I've come to Michael and Ashley, as well as Antoinette, to talk about community work, whether it be like doing job fairs, business plan development, and working in terms of trying to get partners, because I don't know all the information, but what I can do is bring people towards people that have that information. So that is what I'm doing, is both working in the corporate space as well as community based. But most of my work also focuses especially on health equity and social equity, and what does that mean, and how do we mitigate barriers. So like, again, job fairs is one of the ways that I'll be doing it. I'm trying to do an event as well in the UK this coming summer, in terms of having those conversations as their market is emerging in cannabis space, and engaging the Black communities there to kind of take over the conversations that are already being had. So I'm looking to engage with anyone who is looking to engage with community, as well as working and bridging that education in terms of what actually diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism, reconciliation, belonging, and truth looks like within a corporate space, and maintaining that within their the corporate culture, really and truly, because I like to play both sides of the fence and making that and bridging that connection. That's what Diversity Talk is really about. So.
Man, congratulations on what you're doing, making sure that you're plugged into everyone here. You already plugged in, and we'll make sure you get connected with Keisha. Yes. You guys make my heart just swell. It's Black History Month, y'all. Black History Month and Black history in Canada. You guys are making history in Canada. Do you guys know the colonialism and all of the depressive things that have happened that you can look at from a country and in a region? You can also look at the birth of all this new goodness that's happening in Canada from Black faces that look like you. And I guys cannot thank you enough for being on the show. Eric Range, I mean, man, it was like hot. Man. Oh my gosh. Like, you see the vision of bringing everybody together, but it just warms my heart. So take us home, Eric.
Yeah, we back to those Fire Fridays, man. We just have some great conversations, fire guests. Thank all of you guys from Canada. For joining us today. We appreciate you. Appreciate the work that you guys are doing for yourselves and for the community. To everybody out there watching, thank you guys for watching us. Make sure you go and pin this video to your timeline and share with your family and friends as well. We'll be back in next week, of course, with another episode of Can't Talk About Us. Until then, this weekend, y'all go love on yourself, love on your family, get some rest, because Monday morning, we got work to do. I will see y'all next week, y'all. Love y'all.
Thanks, guys. Thank you guys so much. Hey, make sure you go to YouTube, subscribe to the page. We love you guys. Take it easy.